Nobody expected this to turn into a full-blown hip-hop firestorm, but once those bars dropped, it was already too late. What started as a few slick lines aimed at F the streets has now escalated into one of the most talked-about moments in rap culture right now. Fans were vibing, playlists were buzzing, until NBA YoungBoy and Fivio Foreign took shots that many believe were directly aimed at 21 Savage's credibility, message, and legacy. And here's the crazy part. 21 Savage stayed quiet at first. No tweets, no IG stories, no sneak disses, just silence. That silence had fans wondering, was he letting it slide or loading up something much bigger? Because when 21 Savage finally spoke, it wasn't subtle and it definitely wasn't friendly. Sources close to the situation say 21 felt the diss crossed a line, not just musically, but personally. F the streets wasn't just a song or a slogan. For 21 Savage, it represented growth, survival, and a hard-earned perspective that came from real loss and real pain. So when NBA YoungBoy and Fivio Foreign appeared to mock that message, many believed they underestimated how deeply 21 would take it. Now the streets are divided. Some fans say YoungBoy and Fivio were just being competitive. Others say they poked the wrong artist at the wrong time. One thing's for sure, 21 Savage didn't erupt for no reason, and what he said next has people questioning whether this beef is just starting or heading towards something much uglier. Stay locked in, because once you hear what 21 Savage really meant, this whole situation is different. What made this situation even more intense wasn't just the diss itself, it was what happened immediately after. As soon as NBA YoungBoy and Fivio Foreign's lines started circulating online, hip-hop timelines lit up. Clips were being replayed, lyrics were being dissected, and fans were drawing conclusions in real time. Within hours, 21 Savage was trending alongside NBA YoungBoy diss and F the streets, even though 21 himself hadn't said a single word yet. That silence wasn't accidental. Anyone who's followed 21 Savage's career knows he doesn't rush reactions. He's never been the loudest on social media, never the type to jump online the moment someone mentions his name. Instead, he watches. He listens. And when he finally speaks, it's usually because something meaningful has been challenged. That's why this moment felt different. This wasn't just rap bravado. This was a challenge to his message, his growth, and the direction he's been pushing for years. F the streets wasn't born out of thin air. For 21 Savage, that phrase represented evolution. After years of street narratives, jail scares, deportation battles, and losing people close to him, he began openly talking about financial literacy, responsibility, and survival beyond violence. Some fans praised the shift. Others criticized it, claiming he was switching up. But 21 never backed down from that stance until now. It had been his line in the sand. So when NBA YoungBoy and Fivio Foreign appeared to mock that exact message, it struck a nerve. NBA YoungBoy, known for his raw emotion and unpredictable energy, has always moved differently in the industry. He's built a cult-like fan base off pain-filled lyrics, defiance, and an against-the-world mentality. He doesn't follow traditional rules of respect, and he's never been afraid to diss someone, even indirectly, if he feels a way. Fivio Foreign, on the other hand, comes from a drill background where aggression, dominance, and street validation are core elements of the sound. Together, their words carried weight, whether intentional or not. Fans immediately split into camps. One side argued that it was just competitive rap, nothing personal, nothing deep. It's hip-hop, they said. If you can't take a bar, stay out of the booth. But the other side saw something more calculated. They believed those lines were meant to question 21 Savage's authenticity, suggesting that stepping away from street ideology somehow made him less real. That idea didn't sit well with a lot of people. Behind the scenes, insiders say 21 Savage wasn't angry right away. He was disappointed. Disappointed that artists who had seen the same losses, the same funerals, the same cycles still felt the need to glorify something he was actively trying to leave behind. To him, F the streets wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. And mocking that wisdom felt reckless. As the hours turned into days, the pressure mounted. Every blog post, Every YouTube breakdown, every reaction video added fuel to the fire. Fans began tagging 21 Savage directly, demanding a response. Some wanted bars. Others wanted clarity. A few even warned him that staying silent might look like backing down. But then came the turning point. During a private conversation that later leaked through multiple sources, 21 Savage allegedly made it clear that he wasn't planning a typical diss track. He didn't want to scream. He didn't want to go viral for yelling. Instead, he wanted to address the mindset behind the diss. To him, this wasn't about proving toughness, it was about calling out a mentality that keeps artists trapped. That decision alone set him apart. When 21 finally broke his silence, it wasn't with music, it was with words. Calm, measured, but sharp. He didn't name names at first, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. He spoke about longevity, about watching too many talented people crash out because they couldn't let go of outdated rules. He reminded listeners that surviving the streets doesn't mean worshiping them forever. And that's when things escalated. NBA YoungBoy's fanbase took the message as a direct shot, even without names being mentioned. Clips of 21's statements spread just as fast as the original diss, but now the narrative had shifted. This wasn't just a rap beef anymore. It had turned into a culture clash. Growth versus grit. Evolution versus tradition. Strategy versus emotion. Fivio Foreign added more fuel by liking posts that mocked the situation, which fans interpreted as confirmation that the diss was intentional. Blogs picked up on it immediately, framing it as 21 Savage versus the streets mentality. Suddenly, artists who weren't even involved were being dragged into the conversation, forced to pick sides. What made this moment dangerous wasn't just the words, it was the influence. Millions of young fans were watching closely, interpreting every move. Some saw 21 Savage as the voice of maturity. Others viewed NBA YoungBoy and Fivio as defenders of raw authenticity. And in between were listeners who simply wanted the music, unaware of how deep the divide really was. Industry insiders quietly began asking the same question: was this heading toward a lyrical showdown or something more personal? Because history has shown that when rap beef stops being about skill and starts being about identity, things can spiral fast. Respect gets tangled with pride. Messages get misinterpreted. And egos refuse to back down. One thing is clear, this wasn't a random moment. It was the result of years of pressure, changing values, and artists moving in different directions. The diss may have lit the match, but the fire was already there. Everything changes, because that's when responses get sharper, lines get clearer, and the industry itself is forced to confront a hard truth. Is hip-hop ready to grow, or will it always be trapped fighting the same old battles? The conversation had already escaped the control of the artists involved. What began as a lyrical moment was now a full-scale debate across hip-hop culture, and everyone, from fans to media outlets to fellow rappers, had an opinion. The streets weren't just listening anymore. They were reacting, choosing sides, and, in some cases, rewriting the narrative entirely. 21 Savage's calm response only intensified the situation. Instead of cooling things down, his measured tone made the contrast even sharper. Fans expected rage, aggression, or at least a few slick bars aimed directly at NBA YoungBoy and Fivio Foreign. What they got instead was reflection, and for some people, that was more disrespectful than yelling. To critics, it sounded like 21 was talking down rather than back. To supporters, it sounded like maturity in a genre that rarely rewards it. The NBA YoungBoy's camp didn't see it that way. Within hours, cryptic messages began popping up, lyrics posted without context, old interviews resurfacing, fan accounts pushing the idea that 21 Savage was out of touch with the reality YoungBoy represented. Whether or not YoungBoy himself intended to escalate things, his audience took it personally. For them, the diss wasn't just about a song, it was about defending an artist who had built his entire identity on raw survival and emotional honesty. Fivio Foreign's role became more visible too. He didn't drop a formal response, but his online activity spoke loudly. Likes, reposts, and subtle captions suggested he wasn't backing away from the moment. Fans interpreted this as confirmation that the original lines weren't accidental. Drill culture, after all, has never been about retreat. It's about standing firm, even when the pressure rises. At this point, the narrative split into two dangerous lanes. One lane argued that 21 Savage was trying to save lives, using his platform to discourage glorifying a lifestyle that destroys too many artists before they ever reach their peak. The other lane accused him of forgetting where he came from, suggesting that success had softened his perspective. That accusation hit harder than any diss track could have, because in hip-hop, authenticity is currency. Industry veterans quietly weighed in. Producers, executives, and older rappers began hinting that this conflict represented a generational divide. The older generation had lived through eras where beef turned fatal, where pride outweighed profit, and where lessons were learned the hard way. Many of them saw 21 Savage's stance as a necessary evolution. But younger fans, raised on constant conflict and viral moments, weren't convinced. To them, aggression wasn't a phase, it was the soundtrack of their reality. Behind closed doors, conversations were happening. Sources claimed that mutual contacts tried to cool tensions, reminding everyone involved that no real benefit comes from dragging this further. Tours, collaborations, and business opportunities were all at risk. But pride doesn't always respond to logic, especially when millions of eyes are watching. Any move, silence, or response could be interpreted as weakness. That's when the tone shifted again. 21 Savage, sensing the message was being misunderstood, reportedly grew more frustrated. Not angry, frustrated. His point wasn't about superiority or judgment. It was about breaking cycles. But the louder the backlash became, the clearer it was that many fans didn't want introspection. They wanted conflict. And in hip-hop, audiences often dictate outcomes as much as artists do. NBA YoungBoy's reputation added fuel to the fire. Known for unpredictability, YoungBoy had a history of turning perceived slights into full-blown feuds. Even without a direct response, the possibility of one kept everyone on edge. Fans speculated daily, was a diss track coming? Was this all strategic? Or was something brewing behind the scenes that the public didn't yet know? Meanwhile, Fivio Foreign's name kept surfacing in conversations he hadn't even spoken in. Some fans accused him of hiding behind YoungBoy's energy. Others argued he was simply standing his ground. Regardless, his involvement ensured the situation stayed active, refusing to fade from headlines. What made Part 2 especially tense was the loss of nuance. Complex ideas were reduced to simple narratives: streets versus success, real versus fake, old mindset versus new. Social media thrives on extremes, and this moment was no exception. Anyone trying to explain both sides was drowned out by louder voices demanding a winner. And then came the tipping point. A clip surfaced, short but powerful, where 21 Savage spoke about funerals he'd attended, friends he'd buried, and opportunities he'd almost lost. The clip went viral, reaching audiences far beyond hip-hop. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about disses anymore. It was about responsibility, influence, and whether artists owe their fans more than entertainment. That clip changed everything. Some fans who initially criticized 21 began to reconsider. Others doubled down, claiming pain didn't excuse preaching. NBA YoungBoy supporters responded by highlighting his own trauma, arguing that everyone processes survival differently. The debate grew deeper, more emotional, and harder to control. By now, it was clear this wasn't ending quietly. Whether through music, interviews, or continued silence, a resolution was coming, and whatever form it took would set a precedent. Artists across the industry were watching closely, aware that the outcome could influence how future conversations about growth and street culture were handled. The pressure is heavier than ever. Lines have been drawn. Narratives have hardened. And the question hanging over hip-hop isn't who won the exchange. It's whether the culture can handle a conversation this uncomfortable without turning it into destruction. The consequences arrive. Not just for 21 Savage, NBA YoungBoy, and Fivio Foreign, but for the entire industry watching from the sidelines. The situation had reached a point where no move could be made without consequences. Silence was no longer neutral. Speaking out carried risk. Dropping music could either elevate the moment or completely derail it. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about who controls the narrative when hip-hop is forced to look at itself in the mirror. 21 Savage understood that better than anyone. Privately, those close to him say he was fully aware that whatever happened next would define how this entire situation was remembered. If he responded with anger, it would confirm his critics' claims. If he stayed silent, others would interpret it as backing down. The balance he needed to strike was almost impossible, but 21 has built his career on navigating impossible situations. Instead of escalating, he doubled down on clarity. In a carefully worded appearance, 21 Savage made it clear that his stance was never about attacking NBA YoungBoy or Fivio Foreign personally. He emphasized that everyone's journey is different, but he refused to apologize for choosing survival over self-destruction. His words weren't loud, but they were deliberate. And that restraint shifted the tone once again. The industry noticed. Executives, radio personalities, and veteran artists began framing the situation differently, not as a beef, but as a moment of reckoning. For years, hip-hop has struggled with the balance between authenticity and accountability. This clash brought that struggle into the open. Suddenly, it wasn't about who had the harder bars. It was about who had the stronger vision for the future. NBA YoungBoy's response, or lack of one, became the next focal point. Fans waited for a direct reaction, expecting a track, a rant, or at least a statement. But instead, YoungBoy remained unpredictable. Some took that as a strategy. Others saw it as restraint. Either way, his silence created just as much noise as a diss would have. In hip-hop, unpredictability is power, and YoungBoy has always understood that. Fivio Foreign, meanwhile, found himself at a crossroads. His involvement, initially seen as secondary, now carried weight. He represented a sound and culture deeply rooted in street energy. Whether intentional or not, his association with the diss positioned him as a symbol of resistance against change. Fans debated whether he should speak up or let the moment pass, but by now, the narrative had grown larger than any single artist. The real shift came from the audience. Listeners began asking different questions. Not who won, but what does winning even look like here? Streams, views, and engagement were high, but so was discomfort. People were forced to confront the idea that hip-hop might be stuck repeating cycles that no longer serve the artists who fuel it. That realization made many uncomfortable. Some fans accused 21 Savage of moralizing. Others accused NBA YoungBoy supporters of glorifying pain. But beneath the arguments was an unspoken truth. Both sides were right in their own way. Pain creates art. Growth demands change. Hip-hop has always lived in that tension. As days passed, the headlines slowed, but the impact didn't. Artists quietly adjusted how they spoke in interviews. Lyrics were scrutinized more closely. Conversations about responsibility resurfaced in spaces where they'd previously been dismissed. This wasn't a viral moment that faded overnight. It lingered, reshaping how people interpreted messages moving forward. And then came acceptance. Not reconciliation, but understanding. No diss track closed this chapter. No apology wrapped it up neatly. Instead, the situation settled into something more realistic: mutual distance. Each artist continued moving in their own lane, but the culture had shifted slightly because of it. 21 Savage emerged with his message intact. He didn't convert everyone, and he didn't try to. His stance remained firm: survival is success, and leaving the streets behind doesn't erase where you came from. For many fans, that perspective resonated more deeply after the dust settled. For others, it remained controversial, but controversy has always been part of hip-hop's growth. NBA YoungBoy remained exactly who his fans expect him to be: unfiltered, emotional, resistant to outside expectations. His silence didn't weaken his image, it reinforced it. He doesn't move when people demand it. He moves when he feels it. And for his audience, that authenticity still matters more than alignment with industry norms. Fivio Foreign continued forward as well. Whether viewed as misunderstood or unapologetic, he stayed rooted in his sound and identity. The moment didn't derail him, but it did place him in a conversation he hadn't planned to lead. And that alone speaks to how quickly narratives can shift in hip-hop. The biggest takeaway wasn't about beef. It was about choice. Artists choose whether to evolve or defend tradition. Fans choose what messages they amplify. The industry chooses whether to reward introspection as much as intensity. This situation didn't answer those questions, but it forced them into the spotlight. And that's why it matters. Because long after the tweets fade and the clips stop circulating, the impact of this moment will still be felt. In lyrics that lean more thoughtful. In interviews that sound more cautious. In fans who think twice about what they celebrate. This wasn't the loudest conflict. It wasn't the bloodiest. But it might be one of the most important. Hip-hop didn't break here, but it bent. And sometimes, bending is the first sign of growth. The story doesn't end with a winner or a loser. It ends with a culture standing at a crossroads, deciding what it wants to become next. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't just another rap story. It's a moment that says a lot about where hip-hop is headed next. So now the real question is, what do you think? Was 21 Savage right for standing on growth and accountability, or did NBA YoungBoy and Fivio Foreign simply keep it raw and unapologetic like the streets expect? Drop your honest opinion in the comments, because this conversation doesn't move without your voice. And don't just comment and disappear. Hit that like button if you appreciate real breakdowns that go deeper than headlines and viral clips. It helps push this video to more people who actually care about hip-hop culture, not just the drama. If you disagree with something said here, even better, engage with it. Debate is what keeps the culture alive. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over. If any response drops, any interview surfaces, or any behind-the-scenes detail leaks out, you already know we'll be on it immediately. No bias, no fluff, just the real context. And one more thing, share this video with that friend who always argues about real rap versus growth. Let them hear the full breakdown before jumping to conclusions. Hip-hop evolves when conversations like this happen openly, not in silence. This isn't about picking sides, it's about understanding the bigger picture. Stay locked in, stay critical, and stay connected right here. More insight, more stories, and more truth coming soon.